Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features Marvel Fanfare, issue number 2, cover dated May 1982. This was a bi-monthly comic in the 1980s, coming out every 2 months. That gave the artists, in some cases, such as Michael Golden here, more time to work on the pages inside and gave him the opportunity to be both penciler, inker and colorist, as he is here on the cover image. And this is a really interesting cover. Those of you who are familiar with various comics artists might recognize a Frank Frazetta influence here on the composition and the style of the cover. But we see here what happened to Spider-Man at the end of the previous issue, the cliffhanger where he was devolved into a more primitive form. So we can see what that manifests as: a big, hairy tarantula here, shredded through his Spider-Man costume and attacking Ka-Zar, Lord of the Savage Land. And this is Tanya Anderson, who is Carl Lyos, aka Sauron's beloved, and she's gone in search of him in Antarctica. And in the background, if you pay close attention, you can see images of Brainchild there. He's the one who devolved Spider-Man to that primitive arachnid form. And also in the background, this bird face, that in fact is the devolved Warren Worthington III, aka Angel. So he's also transformed, mutated into a primitive form via the machine that Brainchild operates. And if you pay close attention again, you will see an image of Sauron up here, roaring with his beak open. So lots and lots of work here. Interesting composition from Golden. Also the colors are interesting. Magenta, red, and also the implication of a blue reflection from the water here on the underside of Tanya Anderson and Ka-Zar there. Yeah, it's a really striking cover. Also, the cover logo has been manipulated in order not to overlay the image of Sauron up there too. So it's quite a designy cover. This would make a very good poster. You do have to take your time with it in order to pick out all the details, including the horrifying visage of the transformed Spider-Man there with all those eyes and the mandibles there that are closing in on Ka-Zar. Let's open this one up to the first page. So what I'm concerned with in this review is part 2 of Chris Claremont and Michael Golden's story, featuring Spider-Man and Ka-Zar in the Savage Land. And we're picking up here from a cliffhanger at the end of the previous issue concerning Tanya Anderson. She pulled herself out of a river and found herself facing a T-Rex. And who comes to her rescue except for Ka-Zar and Zabu there? And I'll tell you this, Michael Golden does a really great job on Zabu, which it's difficult to draw cats and it's difficult to draw big cats convincingly, but in the course of this particular issue, he does really, really well. Also, just one little detail here in Al Milgrom. He's the editor of Marvel Fanfare. So there's this like device where he's asking people involved in the issue for interviews, and none of them want to. But we learn a little bit about Michael Golden here, which is that he lives in Florida. So he lives in Florida at the time. So that raises the question as how did he get his pages up to New York? Did he go once a month with the pages, or did he mail them up to New York, or what was the story? Also a little bit of interesting information about Paul Smith, who will be an artist on issue number 4. And part 4 of this storyline. And we learn here that Paul Smith was working for an animation studio in California when he got the call and moved himself and his artistic endeavors to Mighty Marvel. So that implies he moved to New York City in order to be a comics artist and of course produce that celebrated run on Uncanny X-Men. It's just coming up in terms of publication history, just coming up, that celebrated run with Chris Claremont on Uncanny X-Men. So here we have, as I said, the cliffhanger. Let's turn the page and see what happens to Tanya and how do Ka-Zar and Zabu fare against the T-Rex. Well, look at that. That's a tremendous splash page there. Really, really great stuff. Look at the way that Michael Golden is using speed lines there, implying the movement of Zabu here attacking the T-Rex right in the chest. And we've got Ka-Zar up there, and he's going for the eye. He's going to stab the T-Rex in the eye, try to get to its brain. Really, really thoughtful stuff. Like, how would you take down a Tyrannosaurus Rex? Well, you'd want to get into its brain, and Ka-Zar is going for it through the eye. So the title of this particular chapter is To Sacrifice My Soul. So who will that be in reference to? Well, there is someone it's in reference to, and we'll discover by the end of this chapter who it is. And the creative team there on the scroll by Chris Claremont and Michael Golden. My guess is that Chris Claremont is providing Golden with a plot. So we're getting Michael Golden layouts of the story. He's deciding how to lay it out, where he's not getting panel by panel descriptions from Claremont. And the rest of the creative team, Joe Rosen on letters and Michael Golden once again providing the colors. So I always think it's best when an artist does as much of the work as possible, pencils, inks, and even colors. Barry Windsor-Smith was the same in that regard. Neil Adams also had a go at doing that level of work. Todd McFarlane did it too. And of course, as I said in the previous video review on Marvel Comics Fanfare #1, Michael Golden, a big influence on a number of the Image guys, including most particularly Jim Lee and Todd McFarlane. So here we see that Ka-Zar is not alone. He's got Savage Land warriors who are backing him up. But look at this down the bottom of the page. The T-Rex's tail really knocks Tanya into the side of that destroyed tree trunk, and so she falls unconscious. You can see the detail of the blood coming out of her nose. And then, because this is a Jim Shooter era editor-in-chief approved comic, we have to have the retelling of what happened in the previous chapter. So we see it there in Golden's panels, all the key story beats from the previous chapter of this 4-part story. For last issue, for detail, see last issue, according to Al Milgrom. So we can skip past that. You'll find my review online. And then we're back in the present. She wakes screaming, surprised to find herself still alive. A man is by her side. She grabs for him reflexively as her scream turns to two anguished sobs, holding him so desperately hard that her nails draw blood. The man doesn't seem to mind. So I like this segue from the T-Rex there to her screaming, yelling no. And there's a couple of interesting art points I want to make to you regarding this face. Number one, Jim Lee is using this as inspiration for a panel of Rogue in Uncanny X-Men 269, set also in the Savage Land. By the end of that issue, she emerges in the Savage Land gateway sensor there. And this shot, this upshot of the nose there, and the way that is realized in the pencils, and then the rendering of the side of the nose there for that upshot. Jim Lee doing a version of that with Rogue as the character in issue 269. But also we see how Golden influenced Todd McFarlane here with the way that Golden is drawing the eyes and the eyelashes there on Tanya's wide open eyes. And very much, and here in particular, these eyes here as well, you can see, or I see, the Todd McFarlane, or how Todd McFarlane was influenced by this style of drawing of the eyes. So in this particular face, and this one here, even that little snub nose as well, is another one that Jim Lee was drawing in that era on Uncanny X-Men. Two different streams of influence. Jim Lee taking influence in relation to the way he was drawing noses at the time, and Todd McFarlane taking influence, well, a few years earlier in terms of the way he drew eyes, in particular eyes on women. Now, let's get back to the story. So who is the man whose flesh she's pushing her fingernails into? It turns out, of course, to be Carl Lyos, her beloved, and the man who sometimes becomes Sauron, but currently he's in his human form and in very broad brush stroke terms, that means he is good and benevolent. And he greets her, and so she yells out in delight, "Oh, my darling, my love." And then Chris Claremont here, in the narrative captions, declares she'd been so afraid that he had forgotten her or found someone else to care for. Not surprisingly, Lyos felt the same fears, but with this kiss, the first of many, both realised that their love is as strong as ever. So that's very much a Chris Claremont style character moment, true love, romance, and also very characteristic of Claremont here, and in particular in the 1980s Comics Code approved comics. This caption, when they finally emerge from their lean-to, it is late that night. So there's an implication that they did a lot of catching up, including physically, in the lean-to there. And that's for adult readers to infer and to go over the heads of younger readers. But look at this level of thought put into the way that the camp is arranged. We've got some of the warriors there resting, sleeping around the campfire, but also here there's a defensive strategy. These spears that are set up in the bushes around the camp, and that will come into play on the next page. So we have Ka-Zar, I think, speaking here, saying, "Our goal is the ruined citadel where you and your friends were attacked. Its construction was ordered by the mad god Garok and his high priestess Zaladane. Together they meant to conquer the savage land. With the aid of the mutant X-Men, we ended Garok's reign," says Ka-Zar, "of terror. He himself was slain, Zaladane taken prisoner, his legions dispersed, their power forever broken, or so we thought. Lately, though, we've heard rumours of a resurgence of Zaladane's cult, this time led by a cadre of superpowered mutants created years ago by the X-Men's archfoe Magneto." And that's a callback to issues 60, 62, 63, 64, 65 of Uncanny X-Men by Roy Thomas and Neil Adams. So there's a link here between the Claremont and Byrne X-Men and the Thomas and Adams X-Men. And Tanya asks a question: "The creatures I saw? Possibly. Tonga," this is Tonga here, "Tonga and I set out with this war party to try to learn what was going on and, if necessary, nip the problem in the bud." And Tonga says that, my friend, is beginning to look a bit more difficult than we anticipated. And he hears something behind from the bushes. So he turns Ka-Zar the thorn barrier. So that's what I was saying earlier about the strategy here. These spears, they were set there in order to protect from any attacker. But how can it protect against a massive triceratops with a rider on top? And that's a great image there by Golden. This whole page is fantastic. Love the lighting from the fire, so the rendering of the shadow there, the hatching. Then, the Triceratops just thundering through the, the thorn barrier and bushes. Really, really well done. And a lot of detail in the inking there. Great stuff. And also, I want to point out, another McFarlane influence, or an influence from Golden to McFarlane. See the way that the hatching is done here on the back of Ka-Zar's, on his back, especially here on the back of his arm. Just the hatch line that way across this way, that level of kind of detail and rendering, that's influential on McFarlane. He's looking at that here as well, and then he reproduces that style of hatching and cross-hatching in his own work. So let's continue with the story. This is an interesting page because it seems like there is an issue with the layout, or at least maybe Al Milgrom or Jim Shooter thought so. So we have our first panel here where Carl Lyos is attacked by this bird claw foot, and he gets in the way to protect Tanya from it. and see we have the magenta arrow pointing us to this as our second panel instead of maybe going across to here. And then you see the interesting thing is we go from here to here, but we don't have an arrow saying to go to here because the narrative caption and Ka-Zar's thought balloon take us naturally here before going here. And interesting to see, I think, what Golden is going for with the layouts. He wants anchor images for the devolved, mutated form of Angel, and we recognize it's Angel from the costume, the shredded costume, and then another one down here for Spider-Man. But when I was reading this in preparation for this review, I had to laugh the first time when I was looking at the design for the devolved Angel, because it looks a lot like a horrific version of Big Bird from Sesame Street. Whereas this version of devolved Spider-Man truly does look horrifying. Really, really monstrous stuff there. So yeah, very cool art on these pages. Whatever about maybe the little ambiguity in terms of the panel order and flow. So Tanya is there. She sees Angel. She recognizes him from the costume. And in Chris Claremont's narrative captions, we're told his cry is as inhuman as his appearance as he dives once more towards the camp, scattering Tonga's warriors with his wings, slashing at them with beak and razor-sharp claws. He's a demon incarnate, possessed by a berserker rage that can only be sated with blood. Now, this is interesting because we don't see all of this here. We don't see him scattering Tonga's warriors with his wings. So Claremont adding in narrative details on top of what we're seeing in Golden's art. And again, I wonder, is this emerging from Claremont had something in the plot that Golden hasn't given him exactly in the art? So Claremont working in what he didn't get in the art in the narrative captions. But even if that's the case, I think that this is all working very well for me. I like it. I like the blend of art and words in this comic. So here we are, and Ka-Zar is attacked by the mutated Spider-Man. Can't twist free, he thinks to himself. Too many arms holding me. What the blazes am I fighting anyway, an octopus? And then he gets a look at it. Good Lord, once this too was a man. An interesting use of a screen tone there in the background as well, behind that horrific mutated Spider-Man. Really like this page here. This layout, the grid of 6 panels, a tier of 3 on top, tall panels on top, and a tier of 3 tall panels on the bottom, is one that Michael Golden favors in these couple of issues. And a little trick that he pulls is that sometimes he will remove the panel border for varying the look of the layout on the page, which I find intriguing. So there's a lot going on in this page action-wise. Seeing his friend imperiled, Zabu instantly leaps to save him. I find that phrasing interesting, that Zabu regards Ka-Zar as a friend, not as master. And I think that maybe issues from the animal behavior of cats that don't have a master like a dog would have a master, and so Zabu hangs around with Ka-Zar because he regards him as a friend. I like that. That amuses me, and I think it works. But see also what I was saying about Michael Golden doing a tremendous job on this big cat. Just look at that, ferocious. And I like the rendering of almost speed lines here along Zabu's back, the hair of his back, as he's leaping towards jaws wide the mutated Spider-Man. The great saber-tooth is one of the most powerful animals in the Savage Land, possibly on Earth. But tonight, he meets his match. So obviously Spider-Man's super strength is still operating there, and so he's able to throw Zabu off. And then Ka-Zar is looking at this figure approaching him. Is it my turn now? All right, you shaggy horror, strike, take my life if you can. Because this is a hairy tarantula that Peter Parker has devolved into. Get this close-up on Ka-Zar with his sharp knife ready to defend himself. Big talk, he thinks to himself. When this nightmare makes its move, there's precious little I'll be able to do to stop it. What's it waiting for? It's hesitating, but why? This is a great panel here, colour hold here of Spider-Man in the background. The facade has changed beyond all recognition, yet within the monster's shell, a human soul battles for supremacy and for a moment triumphs. So there's a pause there. Also something I want to note is look at how flat and wide is Ka-Zar's nose in Michael Golden's rendering. You can see it there, and over here as well. Whereas Jim Lee years later, well, John Byrne first of all drew Ka-Zar with a more narrow nose, and likewise Jim Lee. So this is distinctive of Michael Golden's version of Ka-Zar. In those seconds, Peter Parker realizes what he's become, what he was about to do, and he screams his agony to the uncaring heavens, howling. While the angel obeys an urge as old as life itself and soars skyward with a captive or prey, so he's grabbed Tanya there. That's another great panel. Love the use of the screen tone in the background as well. What about Spider-Man? Spider-Man merely leaves. So off he scuttles. Unexpectedly, deprived of their two superpowered allies, the assault force is soon routed by Tonga's warriors. And he yells after them. Look, the Triceratops has been taken down as well. Love the little detail of the tongue hanging out there. The blood, the magenta blood on the ground. All the spears sticking into it. And Zabu there. Love that pose on him as he's kind of like hunched down. Really, really well done. Michael Golden doing a great job there. So Tonga there boasting, no matter how far you run, how well you hide, you will be found. And Ka-Zar says, I'm sure they're suitably impressed, Tonga. How badly did they hurt us? So here is the review of the damage done. 11 dead, 19 wounded. And most of those will die ere morning. Zaladain's butchers dipped their blades in poison. Ka-Zar from here onwards will be fighting on their ground, facing an army instead of a raiding party. We cannot continue without more men. I would be leading my warriors to slaughter. And Lyos gets involved. He says, Ka-Zar, they've taken Tanya. Ka-Zar says, I know, Carl, I saw. And Tonga says, there is a bitterness in your voice I've never heard before. I do not understand. So this is an interesting little character moment from Claremont because, of course, Ka-Zar, even though he's Lord of the Savage Land, he's not from there. He says, it's anger, Tonga, and frustration. If we had a proper physician at hand, if we had access to a hospital, your people might at least have a chance at survival. I'm sorry, I love the Savage Land, but so much of the agony you accept as the natural order of things seems to me so tragic, so unnecessary. But then the subject is changed because there's part of the costume of the spider on Ka-Zar's blade, a piece of cloth, and Ka-Zar thinks to himself, holding it there, it's part of Spider-Man's costume. Was the monstrosity I fought him? But what power could have changed him so? What fiend could have done that to him? And so they make their way to the ruined city of Garok, the mad god. As they approach, the frequency and size of enemy patrols increase. Zabu and Lyos are more than ready to fight, but Ka-Zar restrains them. Against such considerable odds, they dare not tip their hand. Meanwhile, in a laboratory deep within the citadel of the destroyed city, good morning, Miss Anderson, it's Brainchild. And that's the transforming machine there. He says, just like a Silver Age or a Bond villain, I trust you had a pleasant night's sleep. So she is manacled to this particular board. And she asks, of course, who are you? What have you done to Peter Parker and the Angel? What are you going to do to me? So Brainchild says, fascinating. You're obviously frightened, but still able to master your fear. I commend your courage. And he continues, introducing himself, his associates, and explains this device is a genetic transformer and says, you, Miss Anderson, will be my guinea pig. But just in the nick of time, Ka-Zar and Carl Lyos arrive and take out Amphibious and Ka-Zar from the off. But it's too late. So the machine, Brainchild, hits the go button on the machine and it starts acting on Tanya. She struggles, cries out in rage, defiance, pain, grief, refusing to surrender as a black whirlpool within her brain slowly, inexorably sucks her down towards eternal oblivion. So here again is that 6-panel layout that I talked about a little earlier, with the tall panels, a tier of 3 on top and a tier of 3 on the bottom, and golden varying the size of the gutters and also the thickness of the panel outline, as here where we've got this close-up on Lycos's horrified face. And then again we see where he'll keep the panel border open at certain points here and here, for example. But back to the story, Ka-Zar orders Lycos, don't stand there, man, charge. Don't give them a chance to react. And Lycos goes for his sidearm. There's an easier way. Either Brainchild returns Tanya to normal now, or I'll blow his brains out. So, what does Brainchild have to say to that? Well, he has got protection in the form of Vertigo, who he orders to use her power on them, which she does. The pale-haired woman concentrates, and Carl Lycos's world turns upside down, inside out. But even as all his physical senses come unglued, his finger spasms against his Colt's trigger. One bullet finds its mark, creasing Vertigo's skull, knocking her unconscious. As she falls, so does Lycos, completely disoriented by her psychic attack. Springing into action in his place is Zabu. And again, a great image of this saber-toothed tiger leaping, and Golden using speed lines on the fur to imply how fast Zabu is leaping there. You can see his back paws and legs there. It's really, really well done. It makes me wonder, has there ever been like a comic that focuses on Zabu? A story? That would be an interesting idea, to do a story just about him. I'd read it anyway. Only to be met and stopped in his tracks by 4-armed Barbarous. And he's delighted to take on Zabu. Ho, last of the Longtooths. Long have I awaited a chance to match my sinews against yours. But Ka-Zar intervenes. Sorry, Charlie, but anyone who hits my cat has to answer to me as well. So he breaks a piece of equipment over his head. On the sidelines, the Man Spider. So interesting the way that Claremont has flipped Spider-Man's name. Now he's Man Spider. Watches, waits, and nigh irresistible lust for battle, for blood, eats away at his soul like a cancer. Yet he does not move. His conditioning forces him to serve Brainchild, while his fragmented memories, plus what remains of his self-awareness, urge him to help Ka-Zar. Torn, he does neither. The Angel, however, dives eagerly into the fray. So we see this horrific version of Big Bird attacking Ka-Zar from behind, snagged by his claws, held tight, and then Barbarous starts pummeling him. Many thanks, Winged One. While you have the Lord of the Savage Land helpless, my 4 arms will quickly beat him to a pulp. So cool stuff. 4-panel page here, so we've got lots of space for the art. And then Man Spider intervenes, saying no. And Brainchild is taken by surprise. What are you doing, fool? Put Barbarous down at once. The Man Spider does as he's told, albeit not quite in the way Brainchild had intended. And so he tosses Barbarous into the transformer equipment, destroying it. But Brainchild there exclaims, "Imbecile, you may have defeated me, but in the process, you've damned yourself." So why is that? He explains here, without the transformer, you can never be restored to normal. You'll live out your pathetic life as you are. Only I can reconstruct the device, and no power on earth can make me do it. Now, here again is another ambiguity, at least initially, where we want to go here normally, left to right and down the page, but instead we're to go down this tier or this column of panels, 1, 2, 3, and then up here. And the way that Golden is kind of communicating this is with the extra wide gutter and the fact that there is no gutter between this panel and this one and this one. So that's how he's telling us, as well as the placement of the speech balloons and thought balloons, that we're to go this way and then up here. So Golden playing around with the conventions of layouts and panel to panel transitions and what one would expect. But we allow it because the art is so amazing. So here again we get that colour hold behind Man Spider of Spider-Man there. Great look on his face. Manipulation of the eyes there to communicate emotion. And thinking. So hard to think. Takes so much effort. Can feel primal urges, lusts getting harder to control. Can't hold on much longer. And he manages speech too. You, Ka-Zar, friend. If no hope, I beg you, kill me. Please, better to die than go on as this obscenity. But Ka-Zar recognizes that it is Spider-Man now. No, my friend, you mustn't despair. There's always hope. We'll find a way. Then we're up with Lyos. He gets up and he sees that Tanya has been devolved into a Neanderthal. And with the Transformer Rex, she can never be cured unless... And so he starts to think, this transformer creates mutants. I absorb energy to live. Theoretically, if I can drain that energy from Tanya, I might be able to return her to normal, but there's a terrible risk. Small doses of energy can harm me, but a large one might well change me into my evil self, Sauron. So, this is the title of the story on the splash page. To sacrifice my soul. That's what he's doing here to save Tanya and then the others. Lord, give me strength, he prays. I can see no other solution. If this gamble pays off, I can cure them all. I must be careful. The more power I take, the more I crave. My human self must remain in control. So how's it going to go? Ka-Zar here takes out his knife again. Either I slay you now or the tribes will do it later. When your bestial nature is taken over for good, as they would any other rogue predator. But before Ka-Zar can even draw his knife, much less strike, we have Carl Lyos laying hands on the head of the Man Spider. The Man Spider glows as bright as a newborn star, and when the glow fades as abruptly as it began, Peter Parker's limp form crashes to the floor. And so Tanya's back to herself. Ka-Zar, it's Carl, she yells. For the love of heaven, stop him before it's too late. But it's too late. He is drawing the energy, the mutating energy out of Angel. Witless woman, have you not realized that it is already too late? So Angel turning human before my eyes, thinks Ka-Zar, while Carl Lyos is transformed into something else. We know what he's going to be transformed into. Turn the page, there we go. Big anchor image of Sauron. And the speech patterns of a Silver Age villain. Behold the rebirth of Sauron, he exclaims. Look on me, ye humans, and despair. And look at the Kirby crackle around his hands as well there. Angel restored back to normal. Never have I felt imbued with such invincible strength. That pale, pathetic Carl Lyos is gone forever. Only Sauron remains. And Ka-Zar thinks he looks and sounds a bit shaky. Sauron must not be yet fully dominant. He's still vulnerable if you can take him. And so he says aloud with Zabu behind him, you've been beaten before, Birdbeak, and cured. And Sauron, he's clever. He says, once savage, I would have crushed your bones to powder for such insolence, but I'm older, wiser. I know what you're planning and consequently will deny you even the opportunity of capturing me. Mark me, Ka-Zar. There is war between us. It will be as fierce and bloody as this land you love, the land I was born to rule, and it can have but one ending. First I will take your soul, and then your wretched life. So now we have a little wrap up in terms of some of the characters. Days later at an American research rescue station just outside the Savage Land. There's goodbyes being said. So who's staying behind? Ka-Zar and Tanya are staying behind. She says, as for my decision to stay, I found the man I love. I won't rest. I can't until he's cured once and for all or destroyed. And Peter's saying, you guys can't do that. Or sorry, maybe it's Angel says it. You guys can't do that job alone. Sauron's as much the X-Men's foe, and responsibility is yours. If you'll have us, we'll be more than happy to help. And you can see that is not exactly what we're getting in Golden's image there. And again, this derives from the fact that Claremont has handed a plot off to Golden. So, you know, like we've got Angel there saying goodbye, Peter Parker too. But he's saying more than goodbye in the speech balloon. And Tanya off panel, or rather Ka-Zar off panel, says, you should know by now, Angel, that the X-Men are always welcome in my domain. Then it's settled. And that speech balloon, it's going to Angel here in this panel, but he's already up here in the rescue chopper. So yeah, so there's a little bit of disjunction there between you know, what Claremont maybe wanted on the page and what Golden is giving him, but I don't have a problem with it. It reads well to me. So it's settled. Did you see the look in Peter's eyes, Ka-Zar? Says Tanya. He jokes and smiles, and all the while he's in agony because he can't forget what happened. And Ka-Zar says, the same look is in the Angel's eyes, Tanya, and in yours. Should I have left well enough alone? Then, she asks, Carl would still be himself, and two good decent men would have been spared a horror that may scar them for the rest of their lives. And Ka-Zar says as he walks off there with Zabu, only you can answer that. And she now walks off as well. I like the way that Golden has done these three panels. Our camera is steady, and it's the figures who are moving in the space, walking down the snow hill, and then Tanya going after him as well. But the background doesn't change, and the camera angle doesn't change. I think that works really well. And as they walk away, Ka-Zar says to her, but remember, you came out of love, and you stay out of love, and Carl sacrificed himself out of love. You know, there are worse motivations. So that's the end of the first two chapters and the end of Michael Golden's work on this continuing story, because it's going to be continued with the arrival of the Uncanny X-Men in the next issue, the next installment, which would be 2 months later. And the artist on that will be Dave Cockrum, and the artist on part 4 afterwards will be Paul Smith. So that's to look forward to in terms of these reviews. Well, I do hope that you enjoyed my review and commentary on Marvel Fanfare number 2, the main story by Chris Claremont and Michael Golden under this fantastic cover. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments section. If you enjoyed my review and commentary, please like and share the video. It really does help the channel. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.